Hey there, and welcome to the She Calls Her Shots podcast. Every week, we chat through different business building topics that will help you gain clarity around your goals, find inspiration in your journey, and also help you create a life and a business that you love. My name is Krista, and I'm a wedding and brand photographer and your go-to no-fluff business coach. In these episodes, we talk through both the tactical strategies, habits, and the mindset work that will help you take those really big leaps. And we always focus on the real talk and the behind the scenes of what it takes to create a sustainable and a thriving business. Because let's be honest, the work isn't always glamorous, but it's always worth it. So girlfriend, let's make some moves and start calling our own shots. Hello and welcome back to the She Calls Her Shots podcast. In today's episode, we are chatting with Annemie Tonken, and she is sharing her super simple steps to creating a profitable business. And she calls it her not so secret steps because, as you'll see when you're listening in, that these are very practical, tangible things, right? It's not some crazy method or thing that you need to learn or anything that feels really unattainable. These steps really are things that you can actively take in your business to help create a profitable business. And so to give you a little bit of background, Annemie has been a professional photographer since 2010 and is now a really respected educator, speaker, and podcaster. And she helps people focus on their business systems and the strategies that are going to help them run profitable, sustainable businesses that they love. And so you'll notice Annemie, of course, has a background as a photographer. And so a lot of the things we'll be talking about today will be photography related. But I still think even if you're not a photographer, even if you're a creative online business owner, the things that she's going to share, the mindset shifts, the actual practical tools that you can use to create a profitable business, I think you'll find that they are interchangeable into different industries. So Annemie is the host of This Can't Be That Hard, which is a top-rated weekly business podcast for photographers. And she's also the creator of the Simple Sales System, which is used by thousands of photographers worldwide to create in-person sales level income and service in an automated workflow-friendly way. And she's also the co-founder of the Family Narrative Conference. So I am really, really excited for you to learn from Annemie today. I think that this episode will be really helpful if you are really trying to take your business to that next level, create that profit kind of forward business and that profit forward mindset. I think that you'll discover so many little tips from today's episode. So I would love for you to connect with me on Instagram, share your takeaways. You can find me at Hey Krista Marie, and I'm excited for you to dive in and learn. So let's go ahead and go right into our conversation. Hello, Annemie. Welcome to the podcast today.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here.
Yes, I'm so excited to chat. And for those of you listening in, I was actually on Annemie's podcast only just a couple weeks ago. So It's always so fun to get to meet and do swaps and share knowledge. And that's what this whole community is all about. So so I'm so excited to chat today. And we're talking about a really hot topic, pricing, which I feel like is always top of mind for people. It doesn't matter what season they're in. It doesn't matter what they're experiencing or going through. Pricing is always such a top of mind thing. So I'm really excited to dive into that with you today. But before we dive into that, let's go ahead and I'd love for you to just share with us a little bit about who you are, what you do, how you kind of first got started in your business. I know you have a really amazing story in that as well. So I'd love for you to just share a little bit of that with us.
Sure. Well, my name is Annemie Tonken. I am a family photographer based in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. I have been in business since 2010, which puts me in the veteran family photography zone at this point, which is kind of hard to believe. Feels like yesterday, but it wasn't. And then the sort of more recent iteration of my career, I'm still working full-time as a photographer, but I also have a podcast and I do a fair amount of education on the business side of things for photographers and particularly family and portrait photographers who are looking to kind of dial in their systems. Systems are kind of my number one jam on the business side of things. But pricing is all kind of rolled into that because, to your point, I feel like no matter where you are in your business, unless you are one of the lucky few who is sort of in a place where they have been around for so long and they have so much kind of organic reach that their prices are just kind of doing their thing and they're fully booked all the time, then you probably look at your prices every few months and are like, I don't know, is it too low? Can I bump it up? If I bump it up, am I going to lose all my people? Like all of those kinds of questions surface all the time. So it's a good topic, and I'm excited to dive in. As far as like how I got into business, my original story is the story of so many other family photographers, which was that I had my first child, was sort of, what had been a very hobby, photography was just for fun. It was something that I did creatively. And then he was born and I became kind of obsessed with taking photos of him. And then, my friends were like, oh, can you take pictures of my kids? I was in a master's program at the time, on a completely different career track, and was kind of not happy with where that was going and didn't know what I wanted to be, even though I was already grown up. And somebody had suggested, like, maybe you could turn this into a career. And here we are 13 years later. But yeah, it's been a long and winding road.
Yeah, absolutely. I love when it happens organically like that. Anytime I hear stories where, whatever it was, like whether it's family photography or I like shot my friend's wedding for the first time and then was like, well, I really like this. I think I want to do this. It's always really fun. I think that's one of the best, it's also kind of a little bit of my story. So I feel like I can relate to that, but yeah. And the pricing, I think, is I know personally, I struggled with that for so long because, I started my business in 2010 and there was a lot less information around how to run your own business. And I kept my prices the same for so long. And I didn't realize until after, like how much of a downside, like how much that actually kind of hurt, I think, and stunted my business growth for a while because I wasn't raising my prices. I wasn't kind of introducing myself to new clients and new markets and things like that. But it's always that struggle. It's that internal mindset that like the questioning of like, is this why I'm not getting booked? Is this why I'm not shooting at these venues? It's always this like backwards question.
Yeah, for sure.
So kind of starting us off, like what's kind of high level, like how, I know you have a strategy around it. Like what is your strategy and your thoughts around like pricing?
So, I think pricing is one of those things that you get a lot of conflicting information about. And you also get a lot of unhelpful, vague information about. Like, I can't stand the phrase charge your worth. Not that I don't understand that it's meant with good intention and all that sort of thing, but like, it's such an unhelpful phrase.
Like how do I quantify that? I would if I knew how to quantify.
I'm going to charge $8 million a session because I'm just, so worthy or whatever. But of course, that's not the way that people interpret that. Instead, they're like, well, I don't know. I'm not, it's fine. It's fine because I will speak largely to the women out there, but artists in general, I feel, have this sensibility of, I love doing what I do. So the time that I spend doing this thing is something that I enjoy. And, I would do it even if somebody weren't paying me. So therefore, this time isn't valuable. And the fact of the matter is, if you were only creating art for yourself, if you were only doing work that you wanted to do, then fine. That's the definition of a hobby, right? Like you're doing it for fun. Nobody's telling you what to do. You have complete control over when you start, stop, what you deliver, all that sort of stuff. But the minute you start charging any amount of money, including like $5, you could charge nothing. You could make nothing. You could say, I'm collecting money. I suggest a donation of $50 for a portrait that is going to be, turned over to the local children's hospital or whatever. You will still get people, once that money transaction happens, who are going to tell you what they want, complain about something or other. Obviously not everyone, but the minute money enters into it, you really have to change your mindset about, yes, this is something that you love. Yes, it's something that maybe comes easy for you. that does not mean that it's not, worth charging real money for and running your expenses and figuring out like, how can I make profit doing this? Because the short version of the story is, if you're not set up to be profitable and in a sustainable way, there you will not be in business for long enough for it to take, to do the things that you want to do with your business, which is serve your clients and help people document whatever it is that you document: weddings, families, even if you're in. Generally speaking, I feel like people who do branding photography and things like that are less, they see it more as the commodity that it is. But those of us who do commissioned work for things that we enjoy, it is hard. There's a big mindset piece to it.
There really is. And it's interesting now because I feel like 10 years ago when I was starting, again, there wasn't a lot of education. So I felt like when I was doing my pricing back then, I was like, well, I'll raise it every time I like invest in something, which was usually me like physically going to like a conference or something or hands-on learning. And I think now it is so important because there's so much there's so many resources out there that photographers can consume and purchase that are going to, I mean, I've seen people in Facebook groups post their pictures like, I just launched my business 6 months ago, and they're sharing photos. And I'm like, it took me 2 years to get to like, to learn some of the things that they're learning. And so because of that, it is so important now, especially to realize like, I am investing in myself. I am learning. I am, doing all of these things to invest in the growth of my business. And it's so important that translates to your clients. But you're absolutely right that the second the money gets introduced, that the mindset piece is the biggest thing you have to switch, because you will get resistance from other people, from yourself, from like your family members. Like, oh, do you think people will pay that much for like it just comes from all places. So it's so important that that's like the number one thing to work on.
Yeah. And I do feel like every time that I'm teaching pricing, the thing that I bring it back to is just like, let's start with the numbers, because the numbers are sort of a very easy, tangible, black and white thing that we can look at and objectively say, this is how much, you have to charge. We can talk later about what you might charge on top of that. But at the very bare minimum, the math will give you a starting place. And yet that is a thing that a lot of people avoid for months or even years when they get into business, is really sitting down and diving into those numbers. And so part of the reason that I think that people don't look at their numbers is, of course, just this fear of like, well, somewhere in the back of their head, they're saying like, if I look at the numbers, then I'm going to have to do something about the numbers. And I'm not sure that I feel confident enough to do that. So they just, play the avoidance game, because obviously anticipation is half the battle. But the other reason that people don't necessarily run their numbers is, I think that, once again, like, this is a thing that a lot of people get, like you, like me. I mean, I just told my story about how I sort of slid sideways into running a photography business. I came from a healthcare background. Like, I didn't know anything about running your numbers or any of that. And to your point, in 2010, there wasn't a ton out there that I was seeing about how to practically do that. But it really is a lot easier than I think a lot of people give it credit for. When it comes down to it, the basic math around running your numbers is just, revenue. So all the money that comes in over the course of a year, minus your expenses. So all of the money that you spend on the business in the course of the year, those, if you take the revenue, subtract the expenses, that is where you come up with this profit number. And if the result is negative, then you're not profitable. And if it's positive, then you are profitable. And people talk about like, well, I don't need that number to be very big, whatever. And that's all fine. But I do like to also point out that when the profit is sort of the, if you compare your business to a person, profit is like water. You have to have it, hydrates the whole process. When you need to invest in something for your business, whether it's a piece of gear or education or anything else, typically speaking, unless that is a planned for expense, that's going to come out of that leftover number at the end. And if that is very, very small, then it's like a person trying to struggle along by like drinking thimblefuls of water or like licking an icicle or something to stay hydrated. And in an ideal world, you're giving your business more opportunity to flourish. So that I like to point that out. But I also like to point out that there are two kind of big mistakes that I see people making when they're running their numbers, especially when they're trying to kind of do it on their own. So the first big mistake is just the whole like not running your numbers, kind of gut checking and being like, it seems like everything's fine. I made $500 when I did that photo session last week, so that feels good. Well, if you haven't really looked at all of your expenses and all that sort of stuff, that may or may not, like it felt good at the moment, but was in the overall sense, is it profitable? So that's mistake number one. But mistake number two, and this is a really big one, is that a lot of photographers, when they run their numbers, don't add their salary in under the expense category. So they may not even add a salary at all. They may just say, well, I'll just take my salary out of whatever's left over after I cover my expenses. But I would say that, excuse me, that's a big mistake. Obviously, again, most of us who are in business are in a position where, we started a business in order to make money, whether we want to make a large amount of money or a small amount of money. We can determine that based on our own needs, but that needs to come out before you calculate sort of what's left over. So we need to put the salary into the expenses column. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. And I think you're right. It is definitely an afterthought. And I think it's also, especially because in the beginning, usually when we're starting off, we're like, well, I don't care how much money we make, which is great. Mm-hmm. But like at some point when you decide that you want to do this full time, it's like very critical that mindset shift and that action happens at that point, because I think there's so many mindset pieces to this that block us from doing this. But it's like, really, if you want to treat your business like a business and feel like you have a business that's sustainable, exactly to your point, like you have to do this work no matter how uncomfortable it is. Because when you have a busy month and it feels really good and money is coming in, great, awesome. But like we all know that like it is seasonal. And so you're going to have those months though where there's not as much coming in and we can't necessarily plan for that to happen. And how are you going to feel in those months if you haven't already set yourself up ahead of time?
Yeah.
And I know it is really difficult, and I avoided it for a really long time. And I know I struggled with it too, because I started off growing my business while still also working full time. Right. And so I always just had that mindset of, oh, this is just extra. If I make money, it's extra. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, when I left my full-time job to do this full time, then all of a sudden I had to go through, I actually have to think of this as like a salary. Yeah. And it was hard because I spent so many years training myself of just telling myself extra money. And I know a lot of people who start while they're also still working full time still struggle with a lot of those same things, because it's hard to think of it otherwise if you don't need, I'm doing air quotes, if you don't need the money.
Right. So I have two suggestions for people who are in that position where they have other income, whether the other income is they have another job or whether they have a spouse who sort of supports the household income. And so their income from their business isn't, I'm also going to use air quotes, important. And I would say, if you are in that situation, I would recommend that you ask yourself, am I trying to go from where I am now to where my business is full-time? Am I trying to go from part-time to full-time? And zero judgment if you're not. I know lots of people who have no intention of going full-time in their business and they want to run it. That can be a tricky position to be in, because as a part-time photographer or part-time small business owner, you still take on all of the, or many of the expenses of a full-time business, right? You're still paying for a website. You're still paying for business insurance and all of the different things. You're still doing all the work to like run your taxes at the end of the year, all of the things. But it can certainly be done. If you want to go full-time, you should set yourself up while you're part-time to be, you're already charging the correct amount of money that you would be if you were to expand your business. all those kinds of things, which does two things. Number one is it starts to help you find the right clients who are, hiring you at the right price point. But it also means that you are amassing the typically very necessary nest egg that is required to then jump from, having a steady salary into not. Because for almost everyone who goes from part-time to full-time, there's a gap of some number of months where you are trying to, even if you're fully booked at part-time, when you switch to full-time, you're going to have to cover some space in your calendar. And so even if you're not doing anything with that salary that you're paying yourself, other than setting it aside as this is what I'm putting toward when I go full-time, then I would recommend that. If you don't need the money and you are just nope, I never want to make this a full-time thing, and I don't really want to deal with being profitable and all that sort of thing, I would also say there's no shame in if enough people are asking you to do photos that you want to charge money for it, but you don't want to deal with running a business, you can also do stuff like run fundraisers for things that are important to you. And then you don't have to set up a business. You can just pass that money directly through. I think that there's so much pressure on people to formalize their business that sometimes they don't think it through all the way. But
mm-hmm. Yeah. Then one of the downsides, as much as I love some communities, not from the creator's intention, but just from hearing everybody else's opinions and things, that we do put a lot of pressure on ourselves of what our business situation needs to look like. And it's so important to to your point, come back to you and ask yourself, okay, but that's great. Really, you could run your business in any sort of way and it'll probably work out in the long run. You just might have some bumps along the way, but it's asking yourself, what's important to me, and how do I feel comfortable structuring my business? And the pricing, I think, even outside of photography, as I'm diving into coaching and I'm working with my business coach and I'm talking about my offers for things, I'll put things out there and I'm oh, I think this will be priced at this, and she's like, Krista, that's kind of low. It's this translates even outside, no matter how educated you feel, no matter how long you've been in business, no matter how, none of that actually matters. That mindset work that you do from the very beginning is going to be the things that are going to continue to kind of help you grow, no matter how long you've been in business, which I think is so crucial.
Yeah, for sure. And that really leads perfectly into the next thing that I always like to talk about when I'm talking about pricing. So you start with just running your numbers because, like I said, that gives you a baseline number that is your minimum amount that you need to charge in order to set yourself up for profitability, right? Now, when you run those numbers, you're going to have to aim for, I'm going to book 20 weddings a year, or I'm going to book 80 portrait clients a year, or whatever the case may be. And if you don't hit those numbers, then it may not be overall profitable. But if you set yourself up for profit per client, let's say, then you're going to eventually, once the marketing piece fills your calendar, then you're going to be profitable. So that's the way that I recommend doing that. But the next piece of it is we don't need to just drink from that thimble, right? We don't need to be just barely profitable. We also need to think about alignment in our business and how our pricing kind of falls into the overall picture of what we want to offer. And so this is kind of I love this topic of business alignment. It's a longer topic, and we're not going to get too deep into that because we would be talking for far too long. But I always like to say, like you were just saying, the first thing that you want to do when you're thinking about your pricing is actually go back to what your preferences and your parameters are for the way that you want to set your business up. And this, by the way, is not a question just for beginners. This is also a question for you on an annual basis, or, even whenever you're running your numbers, for sure, or whenever you're considering a pricing change. But also, if something just feels like it's off about your business, I always go back to what are my preferences and what are my parameters. So by preferences, I mean things like, who do I want to work with? And that's not just wedding clients. That's I want to work with people who are, couples who are in their 30s, who both have professional, and they're paying for their own wedding. Or I want to photograph young families in my rural hometown in, Nebraska or whatever. Like, you are going to have the who, the what, do you want to work in a studio? Do you want to work outside? Like, all those different kinds of the preferences for how you like to run in an ideal world, what you would like to do with your business. And then your parameters are things like the time, money, and resources that you have to put toward your business. So, for instance, if you want to do studio photos, but you don't have a studio, then one of your parameters is, I don't have a studio. Like, I have to figure out a different way to achieve that preference. But other things are like, one of my parameters is I have to earn, I don't know, $70,000 a year to cover my mortgage and my health insurance and my whatever those cases may be. So your parameters and my parameters may be very different.
Hey there, it's Krista here. If you're a creative business owner that wants to feel more confident in your skills and your ability to create a thriving business, I'd love to invite you to join me for my newest 30-day challenge called The Confident Creative. It's completely free, and inside the Confident Creative Challenge, I'm helping you implement the strategies that will not only help you feel more confident as a creative business owner, but I'm also giving you access into the exact tools that I use to bring in more joy and money to my growing business every day. At the end of the day, our confidence really does affect how much our business can grow. We have to deeply believe in ourselves and feel gratitude for where we are right now if we want to take things to the next level. But oftentimes our doubts, our fears, our worries, our insecurities, all of these things can sometimes take over in our mindset and really keep us playing small. So if you're ready to join me inside the challenge, head on over to heykristaMarie.com/challenge. And as soon as you join, you'll get immediate access to the challenge information, the guided PDF workbook, the daily journal prompts, and a beautiful daily checklist to help you track your results. There's honestly no better time to join me than right now. So if you're ready to gain massive clarity, unleash your inner confidence to create that life and business that you're proud of, I can't wait to see you inside the challenge. So again, that's heykristaMarie.com/challenge, and I can't wait to see you inside.
Those two things, your preferences and your parameters, should dictate everything else about your business. That should be the first piece that you take stock of. It's not even so much you set those things. You just have to look at the reality of what you prefer and what you need and have, and then everything else flows from there. So if you're someone who is trying to do family photos in a relatively rural area where people don't have a lot of money or whatever, and your preferences dictate that you are, you need to, or you want to do, I don't know. So now I'm trying to come up with an example off on the fly. But I guess what I'm trying to get to is if you have a situation where you need to make X amount of money and you are trying to serve this kind of client, you have to find a way to connect those dots and make an offer at a particular price that works for both of those things. So if I want, back to the rural town, whatever, and I want to have, I want to do a really high-end portrait session type thing where I'm making $4,000 in sales, I'm going to have to think about, is that reality-based? Is that going to work? And how can I sort of tweak the seesaw of the number of clients and the total expense? So maybe I do this luxury experience, but I take down some of the expenses and then am able to add more clients so that the total number that I make over the course of the year comes out. I feel like that was a really roundabout way of saying it. But basically, I guess what I'm just trying to say is that your alignment has to do with who you're serving, and the way that you're serving them should then dictate everything else, including what the price point is, so that you can connect what you want to do with the people that you want to serve.
Yeah. Well, and as you were saying that, it made me think of, and I know where you, I'm trying to like place, I was like trying to place Chapel Hill outside of, but so I have a good friend who lives, just outside of Charlotte,
Mm-hmm.
I think like 40
Yeah.
minutes or so. And so it made me think of like, especially those cities where the place that you live may not, like maybe you do want to serve the clients in that area. Maybe you don't want to serve the clients in that area. Maybe in those instances, you're like, you know what, actually, I want to serve people in Charlotte
Right.
just because that tends to be more of my market, which is totally fine. But like what I think kind of to your point of what you're saying is that, but now that's the driving,
Right.
that's the gas, that's the, like, it's the mileage on your car. It's all these things that you then have to like add on and put in, and not to say that you couldn't do those things. Maybe you want to rent a studio in Charlotte. Well, that'll probably be more expensive
Right.
than the place that you live. So it's like taking into account all of these other factors is really important. But it's also, it's,
Right.
it can be really scary because you might look at that number and be like, oh, that's really high. But I always tell people, I'm like, there is a person for every price point, and it does not matter. Like, I don't know your opinions on this, but I feel like I hear, oh, pricing dead zones. And I'm like, it's probably a different problem. Like maybe you're not properly communicating the value, or like something is maybe like off, but I don't think there's like a price that people can set where someone's like, oh, I absolutely won't pay that. I think it's more of a marketing or like how you're communicating that value that's actually going to be the thing that makes the difference.
Yeah, totally. So it's funny that you bring that up because I was just talking to some people this past week about like the dead zone for pricing. So I do believe in a dead zone for pricing, but in order to get yourself out of the dead zone, I don't necessarily think that changing your
Yeah.
pricing is the answer. It can be, although my feeling is if you're kind of priced in the middle, and every time that somebody contacts you, they're like, we decided to go with somebody else, or they ghost you altogether. If you keep getting that, or if people are telling you you're too expensive and you're like, I guess I need to lower my prices. If you're in that mid range, I feel like 9 times out of 10, you could also just double your prices, and you will also start to get more people connecting. But without changing your pricing, I think that the reason that a lot of people fall into that dead zone has to do with the third piece of pricing and the way that I see it, which is kind of the buying and selling psychology that comes into the way that your pricing is structured and offered to your clients. So many photographers in weddings, portraits, whatever, it's just here's the price and here's what you get, right? There's one offer, and it's one size fits all, with sometimes a little bit of modification. And I think that that can be really restrictive for someone who is. I think what happens is if you get 3 or 4 quotes from different photographers and they're all just like, I'm all inclusive and it's $800. I'm all inclusive and it's $700. Presumably everyone you reached out to, you like their work. So then what are you comparing? You're comparing price. So if you are in that mid zone, it's like there's almost always going to be somebody who's a little bit lower than you. On the other hand, I do see a lot of photographers who put a lot of information in front of their clients on their websites, like before they even have a chance to communicate with that client. They are overloading them with like, here are 7 different kinds of sessions. I do, day in the life, or you can do a 1 hour, or you can sign up for a mini. And this one is a mommy and me. And this one is, I could go on, but like you actually go to somebody's website and 8 times out of 10, I feel like there's a whole bunch of jargony kind of options, because we all believe that like we want to show people that we have we're flexible and we're willing to meet them where we are. In our minds, we all feel like we want all the options, but time after time, like research study after research study shows that people need a more curated experience. They need curated options. I always use the Netflix example, and this actually literally happened to me last night, where we were planning on watching this one show or movie and it wasn't released yet. And we were like, oh, so we started scrolling And 20 minutes into scrolling and not being able to agree on what we were going to watch, I was like, never mind, I'll read my book. And I just left. And that happens to our clients sometimes before they even reach out to us. But often, it's like somebody sends us an inquiry and we send them a PDF and we're asking them to read like a 4-page document or a 6-page document. It's not going to happen. So too many options. And on the reverse side, like just one option that has absolutely no flexibility. I think both of those can contribute to a price point that doesn't hit. So you're misdiagnosing the problem. Another factor is too much time. I feel like we give people, again, we think, well, I don't like it when somebody tells me I have a deadline, so I'm not going to give anybody else a deadline. I'm not going to follow up with them because I don't want to pester them. I'm not going to, ask them to make a decision because I don't want to come across as pushy. I totally understand all of those feelings and have them myself. But at the same time, I also know that even myself, I need deadlines in order to make decisions. It's the reason that we have, there's positive deadlines and there's negative deadlines. So you can have like a Labor Day sale where you're like, ooh, if I buy this refrigerator by Monday, I'll save money. Or, this is 30% off right now. And there's also the sort of like negative consequences of a deadline, which is this offer expires on this day or whatever. So I think that we can set our businesses up in a pleasant, cheerful way to move the process along. And I think that that is also necessary. And when it comes to like when you're first trying to book a client, a lot of times that comes down to just following up with people multiple times, which is really necessary. And then the other piece of the psychology puzzle when it comes to pricing is lack of clarity. So it kind of goes back to, you give somebody 1,000 different options, whatever. But lack of clarity can come in a lot of other ways. You want to make sure that, at all times your offers are clear. They are understandable to somebody who has never had their photo made before. I feel like all of these things are best served to clients when you're having a conversation with them. So whether you have an in-person meeting or you have a phone call with a prospective client, being able to kind of curate that conversation so that you're walking someone through exactly what they want and like reading their reactions and being able to sort of steer them through the process is so valuable. And people, for fear of being pushy or for like they are nervous about the idea of talking directly to a client about money. When you are able to walk somebody through that process, what you are giving them is confidence that they are going to get what they want. And at that point, price becomes much less relevant. So, basically it's like run your numbers, figure out what the minimum is. Then make sure that that number or more is in alignment with the service that you provide and the way that you provide it. And then set yourself up for success by kind of taking away some of those roadblocks that a lot of us mistakenly put in our clients' way. And that's how you price an offer that sells.
Yeah, I love that. And particularly the last thing you were talking about of sometimes I find this a lot. Like I'm an Enneagram 9. I've many of my listeners I know are either 9s or 2s, or a lot of us fall into this camp where we're so worried about what are our clients going to think. We don't want them to think that we're pushy. One thing I've learned over time, which took me a long time to learn, and I'm still learning it, but your clients will actually appreciate if you have a business that to them feels structured, like here's my pricing. If you can confidently come across and say, this is my value, these are the things I provide, instead of coming from a place of like the people pleasing of, oh, well, do you like this? Like, oh, I can give you this. Like people aren't going to feel that inner like trust in your business because it's like, oh, I guess she just kind of like does everything and offers everything. Whereas if you can confidently cross to them, hey, you know what? You said this is important to you. That is definitely something we can do. Here's the price. Here's this. Like they will feel like there's a process, there's a system. They can like trust that they're going to get what they're going to, what they're looking for. And there's like, it's flipping that script of like, oh, I'm not being pushy. I'm actually like serving them better by kind of being clear in what I provide in my business. Like it's not pushy. It's actually a good thing.
I had a funny experience just yesterday having to do with the concierge of a hotel. And as you were saying that, I was like, this is exactly it. If you are staying, let's say that you are at, a hotel that has a concierge desk and you need to take a cab to go across town. And outside the door of the hotel, there are, 15 guys standing there with like the aggressive, book my cab kind of, they're trying to get you to, or you're walking out of the airport or whatever. And everybody's trying to like sell to you. And then there's this concierge desk, and you walk up to the concierge desk, and the person who's like dressed nicely and just, standing there, and you say, how much does it cost to get across town in a cab? And they say, oh, absolutely. We have a car service that we use. I can place that call for you. What time would you like? What time would you like your car to arrive? But the price point on that is double the people who are outside, and you're not sure if those people are trustworthy, and you're not sure, like, am I going to literally get taken for a ride? Again, I mean, this is just off the top of my head, so it's a little bit of a messy metaphor, but we want to be the concierge who seems like they know what they're doing. They're, it's not going to be a difficult process. You're not going to have to like double check on Google Maps while you're driving across town to make sure that somebody's not like, going way off course to rack up the price. And when we feel confident in that way, we're often willing to part with the money. It feels like a worthwhile expense. So a lot of us, when we do run our numbers for the first time, do come up with a number that scares us. And we're like, I'm not sure, like that's more than I'm charging. And people are already telling me that I'm too expensive. Sometimes it's just a matter of the like alignment and psychology pieces, getting those in order, and then you can charge a lot more. We have all seen photographers out there that were like, how are they charging that much? My work is just as good and I can't get anybody to hire me. If that's your experience, I invite you to consider these other areas.
And really leaning into like the value that you provide and understanding that, I think, is such a big piece. But this was so great. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And my last couple questions, just kind of keep it light and fun. I always like to ask people, and I know we chatted about this before we hit record, but I feel like as a growing business owner, there's always things that I'm learning or relearning, or something that I've learned at one point that at some point I forget. And then later in the future, I'm like, oh yeah, like relearning it again. Is there anything that you feel like lately in your business that has been kind of either that aha moment again, or like a game changer, whether it's like a process or workflow or anything that has really just kind of like made an impact?
Yeah, I think the one that I always like to talk about, it's not that it happened recently, but it is a lesson that I learn again and again and again. And the more I learn it, the more I just want to like shout it from the rooftops, which is basically, and again, I came into photography from a totally different background. So maybe I was slow to learn, but I guess the short answer is that systems are 100% key to building a business that works in the long term. And it took me a long time. And the first system that I truly implemented, or the first time that I really learned about the power of systems in my business, was when I invested in a CRM. And all of a sudden I went from a business where I was like potentially missing meetings and, trying to keep all of this information in my head. And I thought that I did a pretty good job of like good customer service and all that sort of stuff. I didn't need a CRM. That was just another expense that was going to, burden me in some way. Literally the day that I finally opened my CRM, like I had invested in it and spent some time setting it up. But the first day that I was using it, I got an inquiry. And from the time that we had a phone call, and then I like sent her my stuff, and she was booked, scheduled, the, prep guide and all that stuff had been sent out within 15 minutes of when we talked. And that was a process that took me days before that, if somebody responded quickly, but like the ease of that and everything else for her. And there was like this light bulb that went off. So I, set up my CRM. And then over the years, it was just like, I almost became addicted to setting up systems in my business. And at this point, I make the same amount of money that I have for about 5 years in my business, which is exactly where I need it to be. It's all good. It's very predictable. But every year I have cut the number of hours that I work. And so now my full-time income comes from about 6 to 8 hours a week. And I feel like the sooner that you can start to systematize your business, the better, and the better that you serve your clients.
Oh, I'm not even going to add anything to that because that was just so powerful. And has there been like anything that you, like a book or a resource or anything that you love to share with other people as far as things that you've learned or read or consumed or videos that you've watched?
Sure. Well, so many, but because we're talking about pricing and all that sort of thing, if you are someone who struggles with pricing and you are like money feels overwhelming to you and you haven't read the book Profit First by Mike Michalowicz, I love recommending that because it's such an eye-opener of a book about how to structure your business finances. And it's a fun, easy read. And if you like audiobooks, the first time I read it, I was listening to it, and he reads it and he does a great job.
Yeah. When you were talking about the pricing, I was thinking about that in the back of my head. So I love that you also recommended that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Annemie, let us know, where can we find you? How can we connect with you? Where can we learn more? Share all of that.
Excellent. Yeah. So the podcast that I host is called This Can't Be That Hard. My business is called This Can't Be That Hard. My Instagram, all the different things is thiscan'tbethathard.com and, at This Can't Be That Hard. But yeah, I was also going to mention, I feel like I didn't do the best job of talking about alignment. It is kind of a complex subject to squish into a little thing. But if this is something that you're like, what does she even mean by alignment? I have a quiz that is kind of a fun, it's like 10 or 11 questions about your preferences and parameters in your business that will then give you a sense of like, this is the way that you might want to consider structuring your business. There's no wrong answers in the quiz. It just kind of gives you a readout of what that business might look like. And so you can find that at thiscan'tbethathard.com/quiz.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. This was so great. And I know that I'm walking away with some insights around pricing. I know our listeners will too as well. So thank you as always for just showing up and being so open and having this conversation with us.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. And I appreciate that you're doing the work of helping spread that message because when it comes to pricing, it's one of those foundational pieces of people's business that if it's not set up right, it can cause major problems down the road. So, yeah, you're doing the good work.
Thank you. Yeah, it's always a work in progress, right? We're always learning something new. So, yeah. Thank you so much.
So good. Thank you.
One last thing before you go. I'd absolutely love it if you left a review on Apple Podcasts. Or if you've already left a review, I'd love for you to share this episode with your business bestie. I love getting to shout out my listeners on the show, and the more listeners that we have, the more that I can help others create a thriving and sustainable business too. Thank you so much again for being a part of this community, and I can't wait to hear your takeaways from today's episode.